All right, listener, get ready, because today we're going deep on some seriously heavy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You guys sent in excerpts from Thus Spoke Zarathustra
Okay.
by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Ah, Nietzsche.
And I gotta say, just from glancing at this, I'm already feeling like it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So,
Nietzsche, he's known for some pretty intense ideas
yeah.
on life, death, and morality.
Yeah, and intense seems to be a theme with him,
Right.
like controversial.
Definitely.
Before we jump into Zarathustra's world, can you give us a little bit of context about Nietzsche himself?
Yeah. So Nietzsche was kind of a philosophical rebel.
I like it.
He challenged pretty much every conventional belief system
Okay.
of his time, religion, morality,
Wow.
even the very foundations of truth and knowledge.
Really?
He was all about pushing boundaries and embracing individual will.
So he was like the philosophical rock star of his day. I guess you could say
Okay,
that.
so how do we even begin with a text like this? Well, I think the best place to start is with one of Nietzsche's most famous concepts,
Okay.
the Übermensch,
Ubermensch. Okay, so
or the Overman, as it's often translated.
the Overman. Now, am I picturing like someone with superhuman strength?
Not quite.
Okay.
It's not a literal superhero.
Okay.
It's more of an ideal,
Right.
a goal for humanity to strive towards.
Mm.
So Nietzsche believed that humans aren't like a finished product.
Right.
We're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And the Overman represents the next stage of that evolution.
Okay.
Someone who transcends conventional morality
Okay.
and creates their own values.
So someone who forges their own path.
Exactly.
And doesn't just blindly follow the rules that everyone else accepts.
Right. And Nietzsche contrasts this Overman with what he calls the last man.
The last man.
Someone who represents the stagnation of humanity.
Okay.
So think complacent, risk-averse,
Right.
utterly lacking in ambition.
Yeah, I could see how these concepts like really apply to us today.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much pressure to
It's-
conform to follow the crowd.
Yeah, and that's why Nietzsche's ideas are still so relevant.
Yeah.
He urges us to question those pressures, to break free from that herd mentality,
Yeah.
and strive for something more.
And to hammer home this point, Nietzsche uses some pretty vivid imagery.
Oh, yeah.
He describes the Overman as a dancing star born from chaos,
That's a good one.
which is just such a powerful image.
It is. It captures that creative potential.
Yeah.
Emerging from the unknown and forging something new.
And it makes you think, like, what would an Overman look like in today's world?
Right.
What qualities would they have?
That's a great question for the listener. Like,
Yeah.
what resonates with you? Who comes to mind?
Okay, so we have the Overman as this, like, aspirational figure.
Yeah.
But how do we get there? Does Nietzsche, like, offer us a roadmap?
He does in a way.
Okay.
He lays out a path of self-discovery through what he calls the three metamorphoses.
The three metamorphoses.
The camel, the lion,
All right.
and the child.
Okay, now how do camels, lions, and children fit into all of this?
Now, think of them as representing
Okay.
different stages of spiritual development. So
Okay.
first you have the camel,
Okay.
which symbolizes burden-bearing, accepting the weight of tradition and societal expectations.
So, like, carrying the weight of all those shoulds and musts that society throws at us.
Exactly. And that stage is important.
Okay.
Because it gives you a foundation, a
Right.
sense of like what you're pushing against.
Okay, and then comes the lion,
Yes,
the
lion.
the rebel
Yes.
who shakes off those burdens.
Right. He represents that stage of rebellion,
Okay.
questioning everything and
Yeah.
fighting for freedom.
Hmm.
Nietzsche actually describes it as slaying the dragon thou shalt,
Oh.
which represents all those imposed rules and moral codes.
So if the lion throws off all the rules, doesn't that leave like a void?
It does, and that's where the child comes in.
Okay.
And the child isn't about like mindless destruction.
Right.
It's about creation.
Right.
It represents innocence, creativity, and a sacred yes to life.
Wow.
The child builds something new in the place of what's been rejected.
So it's not just about tearing down the old ways.
Right.
It's about building something new
Yes.
and embracing the world with a fresh perspective.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And each of these stages is essential for growth.
Yeah.
You can't just skip the camel and go straight to being the lion or the child.
You can.
You need that foundation
Okay.
of carrying burdens to understand what freedom truly means,
Right.
and then the strength to fight for it, to really appreciate the creative potential of the child.
This is making me rethink like my own journey a little bit. It's like
Yeah.
a framework for understanding how we evolve and challenge ourselves.
Exactly. And Nietzsche takes this challenge even further when he talks about the revaluation of values.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Revaluation of values. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It is.
Is he talking about like rewriting the Ten Commandments?
It's even more radical than that.
Oh, wow.
Nietzsche challenges us to question
Mm-hmm.
the very foundations of good and evil, truth and lies.
Okay.
So he argues that these aren't some kind of universal truth handed down from on high,
Uh-huh.
but rather concepts created by humans.
So he's saying morality is subjective.
Yeah.
It all depends on your perspective.
He's suggesting that we have more power than we realize.
Okay.
Nietzsche believed that man gave values to things he created meaning.
Wow.
In other words, we're not just passively inheriting a set of values.
Right.
We're actively shaping them.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
Especially considering the time period he was writing in.
Right.
But doesn't that create like a moral free-for-all?
Mm-hmm.
If everyone gets to decide what's right and wrong,
Right.
how do we prevent chaos?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But for Nietzsche, the revaluation of values
Okay.
isn't about descending into anarchy.
Okay.
It's about taking responsibility for the values that we
Right.
choose to uphold and recognizing that they might not be absolute truths.
Hmm.
He wanted us to examine why we believe what we believe,
Okay.
to question our assumptions.
So it's more about being conscious of the values we choose.
Exactly.
Rather than just blindly accepting what we've been taught.
Yeah, it's a call to critically examine our own beliefs
Okay.
and decide for ourselves what holds true.
So this applies to everything.
Yeah.
Not just the big ticket items like good and evil.
Right.
Nietzsche had some pretty thought-provoking views
He did.
on love, pity, and suffering as well.
Yeah. What did he have to say about those?
I'm almost afraid to ask.
Well, let's just say he wasn't exactly Mr. Rogers. For example, he argued that pity could actually weaken us,
Really?
that it kept us focused on the suffering of others
Right.
rather than our own potential.
Okay.
And he saw suffering
Mhm.
as a potential source of strength, something that could forge us into something greater.
Wow, those are some challenging ideas.
They are.
To grapple with, I can see why he was considered so controversial.
Oh, yeah, he was definitely a disruptor.
Yeah.
But that's what makes his work so compelling even today.
Right.
He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, to step outside our comfort zones,
Yeah.
and really examine the values that shape our lives.
And he does this in such a unique
He does.
and captivating way.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier his use of symbolism and metaphors.
Right.
Can you give us some examples of how that works
Yeah, absolutely.
to bring these complex ideas to life?
So Nietzsche was a master of using imagery and metaphor
Okay.
to convey philosophical concepts.
Good.
For example, think about the dancing star born from chaos that we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's not just a random poetic flourish.
Right.
It perfectly encapsulates the creative potential of the overman,
Yeah.
someone who embraces uncertainty and forges their own path.
I love that image.
Yeah.
It's like a visual representation of what it means to overcome limitations
Right.
and create something new.
And what about the three metamorphoses?
Yeah.
The camel, the lion, and the child.
Right. Are those just cute animal stories?
No, we're not.
Or is there something deeper going on?
There is definitely a deeper meaning there.
Okay.
Nietzsche carefully chose those animals to represent specific stages
Mm.
in our spiritual development.
Right.
So the camel, burdened by the weight of tradition,
Mm-hmm.
symbolizes that initial phase of accepting what we're given.
Okay.
The lion, fierce and rebellious,
Right.
embodies the necessary stage of questioning everything and fighting for freedom.
Okay.
And finally, the child,
Yeah.
full of innocence and wonder,
Right.
represents the creative potential that emerges when we shed those old burdens
Uh-huh.
and embrace a new way of seeing the world.
It's amazing how those images can make these abstract philosophical concepts
It is.
suddenly click into place.
Yeah,
It's like finding the missing piece of a puzzle.
exactly. And that's the power of Nietzsche's writing.
Yeah.
It's not dry academic philosophy. It's poetry infused with deep insights into the human condition.
He definitely had a way with words.
He did.
And, it's not just the imagery that makes his work so compelling.
Yeah,
There's something about his tone, his voice, that draws you in.
I agree.
Yeah.
He's both challenging and inviting at the same time.
Uh,
He forces us to confront difficult questions.
right.
But he also seems to have this deep empathy for the human struggle.
It's like he's walking alongside us on this journey of self-discovery, even though he lived over a century ago.
He was very much ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenging journeys, there's one more concept we should touch on.
Okay.
Nietzsche's idea of amor fati.
Amor fati.
or love of fate.
Love of fate. Okay, that's a new one.
It is.
What does it mean to love your fate?
This is where Nietzsche really asks us to step outside our comfort zones.
Okay.
Amor fati is about embracing everything that happens to you.
Okay.
The good and the bad, the joys and the sorrows,
Mm.
as part of your unique and necessary path. It's about accepting that even the difficult or painful experiences have a role to play in
Man.
shaping who we become.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Especially in a world where we're constantly trying to control our circumstances
Right.
and avoid pain.
Yeah, how can we learn to love the things that hurt us?
Yeah.
It's not about seeking out pain, of course,
Right.
but it is about recognizing that even the difficult experiences
Okay.
can teach us valuable lessons,
All right.
help us grow, and ultimately contribute to a richer and more meaningful life.
Okay.
Think about it like this.
Yeah.
If you can embrace everything that life throws at you, then nothing can truly defeat you.
That's a powerful perspective.
It is.
It's like taking control of your narrative.
Yeah.
Even when things feel chaotic and out of control.
Exactly. And it's a powerful antidote to nihilism.
Okay, nihilism. Can you remind us what that is again?
Nihilism is basically the belief that life is inherently meaningless.
Right.
It's a pretty bleak outlook. And Nietzsche saw it as a symptom of a society that had lost its faith in traditional values and had yet to find a new source of meaning.
So by embracing amor fati, we're essentially rejecting that nihilistic worldview.
Exactly.
And choosing to create meaning even in the face of suffering.
Right. And this brings us back to the core of Nietzsche's philosophy.
Okay.
The power of the individual to create their own meaning,
Right.
even in a world without inherent purpose.
It's all starting to connect now.
It is.
It's about taking responsibility for our lives, questioning our assumptions,
Yeah.
and embracing the journey even when it gets tough.
That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
And remember, we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a dense and layered work,
Yeah.
full of insights that can take a lifetime to unpack.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already,
We have.
but I also have a feeling there's a lot more to explore.
There always is with Nietzsche. And speaking of exploration, maybe this is a good time to step back for a sec and consider what all this means for us.
Yeah.
You know, for the listener today.
Right. We've been digging deep into Nietzsche's ideas.
We have.
But yeah, we need to connect it back to our own lives.
Exactly what's fascinating about Nietzsche
Yeah.
is how his ideas written over 100 years ago
Right.
still resonate with us today.
Yeah, it's almost like he was writing with today's world in mind,
Right.
with all the pressure to conform,
Yeah.
the feeling that life is meaningless.
He taps into those universal human struggles.
Hmm.
And he doesn't offer easy answers or prepackaged solutions.
Yeah, that's what's so refreshing about him.
It is.
He's not trying to spoon-feed you a philosophy.
Right.
He's challenging you to think for yourself.
He's giving you the tools, the concepts, the questions,
Uh-huh.
and encouraging you to build your own understanding of the world.
It's a very individualistic approach,
It is.
which makes sense given his emphasis on the will to power.
Exactly.
It's like he's handing you a toolbox and saying, here, figure it out yourself.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And that can be daunting.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly empowering
It is.
because it means you're not passively accepting someone else's version of truth.
Right?
You're actively creating your own.
You're in the driver's seat of your own life.
Exactly.
And that's both a responsibility and a tremendous freedom.
So what do you think Nietzsche would say to our listener today?
Yeah.
Someone grappling with the complexities of modern life?
Yeah, someone trying to find their own path.
Right.
I think he'd say, embrace the chaos. Question everything. Become who you are meant to be.
Powerful words.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit intimidating,
Uh.
but also incredibly inspiring.
Exactly. It's a call to action.
Yeah.
A call to embrace the fullness of life with all its challenges and uncertainties.
And who knows, maybe by wrestling with these ideas,
Yeah.
by questioning our assumptions,
Uh-huh.
embracing the journey, we can all take a step closer to becoming our own versions of the Overman.
Perhaps that's the ultimate challenge
Yeah.
that Nietzsche leaves us with,
Mm.
to define for ourselves what it means to overcome, to transcend, to become.
And what a journey that is.
It is.
Listener Nietzsche talked about self-overcoming.
Right.
But how do you define it?
Yeah.
What challenges are you facing?
Right.
And how can you use Nietzsche's ideas to navigate them?
What would your Thus Spoke Zarathustra sound like? It's something to ponder as you continue your own exploration.
That's all for this deep dive, listener. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep becoming.